Good afternoon, guys. It is now week 4 in our Settlements of the U.S. unit. And this week we mostly focused on government in the 13 colonies, specifically in each of the 3 different regions. And we found that most of our governments were inspired by religion, which makes a little bit of sense if we think about why most of the settlers came to the New World in the first place. So there are really 2 main reasons that they would come. It was either they were trying to escape religious persecution and have religious freedom, or they were trying to make money with cash crops or have better economic opportunities in the New World. But it's important to know that our governments today are strongly related to the governments that we started out with in the original 13 colonies. It just evolved over time. So things have changed and some things have stayed the same. So for a second, let's put ourselves in their shoes. So if you think about a lot of the people who originally came to settle in the New World, they were coming to be able to worship their own religion. Imagine if you or your family didn't get to do things the way they want to and like to right now. So every family in this video is going to have a different family situation. Your family may not practice religion. Your family may practice religion. Your family may do a little bit. But whatever it is that you guys choose to in your family, it's your choice what you get to do. It's your decision as a family what you get to worship and believe in or not. But in some places, people don't get to make those decisions for themselves. They're told by their government the way that they have to live their life, what to believe, and how to behave. So we had different groups coming to the New World because they wanted to be able to believe what they wanted and do it the way they wanted to, which was a little hypocritical later on because they didn't necessarily allow other people to live their life the same way. We'll talk about that in just a second. So we have some different types of religion in the New England colonies. Mostly, we would have Pilgrims and Puritans. Both of those groups were similar with some differences, but the Pilgrims and the Puritans, as a whole, they had some pretty strict rules and laws. And in times, they actually could treat other people unkindly, just like we were talking about a second ago. So if they didn't believe what the Puritans believed, then they might be kicked out, they might be shamed, they might have a lot of different consequences for not believing in the same religion as the Puritans did. They would hold town meetings in meeting houses like this one right here. And like I said, they're very religious based. Their religion really affects their government. And if people didn't think in line with those strict rules and strict laws, then they could be treated unkindly. And some of those ideas that people might have had, like gender equality, that means believing that men and women are equal. Well, if they believe that, that's one thing that you shouldn't be doing in the Puritan religion. That was a liberal idea. And things like that, things that talked about freedom and equality and things like that were not necessarily smiled upon with the Puritan religion. Only men could be involved in this government, and to be involved in this government, they had to be part of the church. And education was very important in the New England colonies, and education is often related to our government. Just like we know today, our state government and our federal government. The federal government is the government of the United States. They give schools funding and help public schools. We also had the middle colonies. The middle colonies were mainly settled by Quakers. And Quakers were peaceful people. They believed a lot in believing what you want to. So that was really positive, especially because the middle colonies had a lot of people from a lot of different countries around the world, not just England. So because people were coming from all over the world, there were a lot of different beliefs and ways that people wanted to live. They had a lot of what's called diversity. And this guy right here, William Penn, was the founder of Pennsylvania, and he was especially accepting. We have a picture here of William Penn and other Quakers being welcoming and kind to the Native Americans. And it's also really positive that the middle colonies had very diverse beliefs and believed in accepting others, because they have a lot of big cities in those areas, like, well, not at the time period, but later on did, like New York City and Philadelphia. And a lot of bigger cities are known for allowing people to have different opinions. And in the middle colonies, their schools were actually run by their churches. Okay, so the southern colonies were not as religious at all. It's not to say that people in the southern colonies weren't religious, which is kind of hard for us to believe because we know in the South we have a lot of religion around us. But they were mostly focused on their economic opportunities in the South. Their government revolved around policies that had to do with cash crops, really, a lot of times. That wasn't the only thing, but that was their driving force, was trying to make sure that people had what they needed. The more wealthy you were, the more powerful you tended to be in the South. So if you had lots of cash crops, then you were powerful. One really important body of government that did happen from the southern colonies was the House of Burgesses, and this was founded in Jamestown, Virginia. If you remember, Jamestown was the first permanent colony in the New World. So what happened was they originally had a really heavy-handed governor named Thomas Dale. And Thomas Dale would just make really outlandishly outdated laws that people didn't want to follow. They were really strict. We could link this to, okay, if you forgot your homework one time, not that you didn't do it, you just forgot it at home, and your principal made you clean the entire school for the rest of the school year because you forgot your homework one time. I'm not saying that's exactly the types of laws, but if you could think about how strict that seems for something so small, that's kind of how these colonists and these settlers felt during this time period under this really strict governor. And so they decided to try to make their government more like England, and they wanted to elect their official. They elected George Yeardley, and George Yeardley formed this group called the House of Burgesses that had different representatives that were speaking for their different purposes. So that's like if each of our classes in the school came up with a student body representative, and so they could have a meeting with Mr. Krytel, and each of them tell Mr. Krytel what our class thinks about different topics. And how are they going to know what our class thinks about? They listen to our class, they ask our class what they think, but if those people come to another leader and speak for them, well, then we hear almost everyone's opinions in the entire school. And that's similar to how it worked. But why it's incredibly important is the House of Burgesses was the first model of democracy in the New World. So it was incredibly special. And that is an important detail that you will want to know on your test, even though we just learned it this week. So make sure you're thinking about that the House of Burgesses was our first model for democracy in the New World. Guys, don't forget that your test for our social studies unit, Settlements of the U.S., is this coming Tuesday the 20th. So use your study guide, and on your study guide, there's a link for a Quizlet. Maybe even your teacher posted the Quizlet link in your classroom. The Quizlet link is also going to be in your lesson planet slides in your Google Classroom on Monday. So make sure you are studying, and not just that you're clicking through it and you're like, oh yeah, that kind of sounds right. You want to make sure that you are studying to remember. So if you study that Quizlet link, you should be in really good shape. It's been really fun to focus on this whole unit of settlements of the U.S. with you guys. Hope you have a great weekend. Bye.